Have you heard about foot binding? Well, we are going to talk about it today. Foot binding was a Chinese custom, primarily for women, involving the wrapping of feet with bindings to alter their shape, resulting in a very small curved foot. It began around the 10th century and continued for roughly 1,000 years, ending with the fall of Imperial China and the Communist Revolution. While initially a practice for concubines and entertainers, it later became a status symbol and a requirement for marriage, impacting all classes of Chinese women. The aspects of foot binding. Origins. The practice is believed to have originated in the 10th century, as I said before, possibly during the Southern Tang Dynasty, possibly as a way to enhance a dancer's performance. The process. Young girls, typically between 5 and 7 years old, had their feet bound with tight bandages, often breaking toes and arched bones to force them into a pointed shape. Social significance. Bound feet were seen as a symbol of beauty, social status, and a sign of a woman's subservience, making her more desirable for marriage. Economic impact. The practice also had economic implications as women with bound feet were limited in their physical ability to work, potentially affecting their family's labor and earnings. Cessation, meaning the end. Foot binding was banned in the early 20th century, and while enforcement initially faced resistance, it gradually faded away through some elderly women in rural areas may still bear the marks of the practice. Foot binding is said to have been inspired by a 10th century court dancer named Yao Niang, who bound her feet into the shape of a new moon. She entranced Emperor Li Yu by dancing on her toes inside a 6-foot golden lotus, festooned with ribbons and precious stones. In addition to altering the shape of the foot, the practice also produced a particular sort of gait that relied on the thigh and buttocks muscle for support. From the start, foot binding was imbued with erotic overtones. Gradually, other court ladies with money, time, and a void to fill took up foot binding, making it a status symbol among the elite. So basically, it's cosmetics. Just like the ladies nowadays when they do cosmetic surgery for anything, breasts, BBL, lips, cheeks. Back then in the 10th century, they felt like binding their feet would make them more dainty, sexy for their man and just cuter. It's just like the video I did prior to this with the giraffe women with enlonging their necks, making it sexier for their man, But let me get into it with some more information about this. A small foot in China, no different from a tiny waist in Victorian England, represented the height of female refinement. For families with marriageable daughters, foot size translated into its own form of currency and a means of achieving upward mobility. The most desirable bride possessed a 3-inch foot, known as a, quote, golden lotus, end quote. It was respectable to have 4-inch feet equal a silver lotus, but feet 5 inches or longer were dismissed as iron lotuses. The marriage prospects for such a girl were dim indeed. Let me read to you what author Amanda Foreman compares a pair of the lotus shoes with, her hand. As I held the lotus shoe in my hand, it was horrifying to realize that every aspect of women's beauty was intimately bound up with pain. Placed side by side, the shoes were the length of my iPhone and less than a half-inch wider. My index finger was bigger than the toe of the shoe. It was obvious why the process had to begin in childhood when a girl was 5 or 6. First, her feet was plunged into hot water and her toenails clipped short. Then the feet were massaged and oiled before all toes except the big toe were broken and bound flat against the sole. making a triangular shape. Next, her arch was strained as the foot was bent double. Finally, the feet were bound and placed using a silk strip measuring 10 feet long and 2 inches wide. These wrappings were briefly removed every 2 days to prevent blood and pus from infecting the foot. Sometimes, quote, excess, end quote, flesh was cut away or encouraged to rot